Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Noe with Speak Easy HR. It is episode 9. I have a wonderful guest with me today, and I cannot wait to get into this topic, which is on one of her books that she has written. So, um, Payroll or Speak Easy HR is presented by Payroll Partners. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. All episodes will be on demand. So if you are not watching live, and it's going to be on demand on several platforms where you listen to podcasts. So awesome guest today with me. I'm going to quickly introduce her. She is an author of 6 books on talent and leadership. She's a contributor to Forbes, HBR, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LinkedIn as a top voice, Fast Company, among many others. And she has worked with Fortune 500 companies, GM, Microsoft, just to name a few. She has over 25 years of experience helping organizations to find, hire, grow, and keep top talent, helping them save millions of dollars. So, special guest today, Roberta Matuson. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me on your show.
Yeah, I am really into this topic. Is I was reading your book over the last couple of weeks on talent, and it's really something that, since you wrote it, I think is still a really hot topic. During this time, with people really wanting to find good talent, retain them, grow with them, and so it's going to be a really exciting topic to get into. So I want to say, thoughts and prayers to the people down south with the hurricane, and people that really don't even live near Florida, some of the Carolinas and Tennessee.
Mm.
Just these small cities, and these videos I've seen are just incredible. So I know you are not near the South, and I am in Kentucky, which obviously we've gotten a lot of rain too, which we needed it, but a lot of people are struggling today, and just want to, just mention that I am thinking of them, and hoping that they can get through all that. So, anyways, I have a couple of things to get to before we get started. So again, I am your host, editor, producer, David Noe, and Roberta is an author. Like I said, she has, which I want to ask you about this one, because you have the global name. You've been known globally as the Talent Maximizer. So I want to get into that and kind of hear about how that all came about. But before we get to that, I have a couple of questions for you, or really anybody watching. Do you have a porky payroll process, or is your current payroll provider hogging your time or money? It might be time to consider talking to us at Payroll Partners. Learn more at payrollpartners.net. And we had recently been to a couple of state conferences for HR SHRM, and this latest one was our pig, which was a big hit. We ran out of them. Last year we had these fun cows. So every year we have a fun little animal theme for our conferences. So wanted to bring that up. So again, at the end of the show, we're going to roll out a special Speakeasy HR deal special for Roberta, and people that want to connect with her on some of her work, which really is, a lot of your services outside of writing books. It's strategy, advisory, coaching, development, workshops, and then Growth Circle, which I want to ask you a little bit about that too. So a lot to really get into. But before we get into it, I have sent you these questions, Roberta, the world famous envelope icebreaker game. And it is 1 through 15. You have to pick a number, and I'm going to pull out the question and see what it is. So do you have a number 1 through 15?
13.
13. Okay. All right. So just so everyone can see, it is 13. Let's see what's in here. I tried to move them around a little bit, but making sure that people get different questions. But what brings you the most happy? What brings you the most happiness in your life right now?
Travel.
Travel. Okay.
Travel, and I'm leaving for Sicily on Thursday. So yes, I'm very
Sicily.
happy
Oh,
this
wow.
week.
Wow. Very exciting. Have you been there before?
I have not, but we're also going to Malta, and I've never been there either. So
Okay.
two new spots for us.
Okay. Yeah. No, that is really exciting. I do have a lightning round, which one question because we'll talk about your background, but first job where you had taxes deducted out of a paycheck.
Well, I worked for the Ponderosa. It was a restaurant. It's still, I think it still may exist in some places.
Yeah.
And every day I went to work in a cowgirl outfit,
Okay.
which is probably how I wound up eventually in Texas because I was used to wearing a cowboy hat. But that was my first real job that I got, like, taxes taken out of.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, it's not something that everyone wants to do is get part of their money taken from them and pay taxes, but it's part of why people work to pay bills, and some of that is to pay taxes. So um, I am going to pull up if anybody is a Forbes fan. You have written articles on Forbes, among many others, if you're on LinkedIn. And there are so many great articles that you have written. I just pulled up a few, but this is your latest from Forbes: Transform
Mhm.
Your Organization, the Power of Group Coaching. So if anybody is watching, or you can just look up on Forbes her work, which was recently posted out there. So anyway, I want to get into your background a little bit because you were thrown in at an early age in your 20s into a situation that you probably were not really prepared for. So take us back to that and when you kind of worked and started in the world of management and talent and everything since then. So,
Yeah, well, as I write about in my book, Suddenly in Charge, which the third edition came out actually in April. So I have seven books, but
okay,
I
seven
mean,
books.
what's one or more books amongst friends? Um, I wrote that book because when I was 24 years old, I went into work one day to find out that my boss had been fired. And I did what I thought any other 24-year-old would do. And I asked the president for her job, and
Yeah.
he actually gave it to me, which was shocking. This was a commercial real estate company, which I worked there for 6 years. I helped take the company public. Um, I thought I knew everything. I was 24 years old. If you remember when you were 24, or if you have a 24-year-old, you probably know what I'm talking about. And that really launched my career because I was in the executive suite for 6 years, and then later on in the executive suite. But so I've got a lot of experience, and when I'm coaching people, I'm not talking about issues that I read about in a book or I wrote about. I've actually experienced the same challenges that they're experiencing,
Yeah.
because regardless of how long ago something happened, it's still the same stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So your seven books. So when you first thought about, okay, I'm going to write a book, was there inspiration? Because I know in this book at the beginning you talk about your mentor, which is Alan Weiss
Alan Weiss.
and Alan Weiss. I'm sorry. So what kind of started the whole thought of writing books back when you started?
Well, it actually was Alan, because I've worked
Okay.
with him for a number of years, and he's like, if
Okay.
you're a consultant, you need to have a book. He just
Yeah.
didn't say how hard it would be to get a book deal.
Got it.
Today, anybody can write a book, you can self-publish. That was not at all what I wanted to do. I mean, it wasn't even an option back then. I really wanted a commercial publisher, and it took me 3 years to get one. And
Okay.
so I landed my first book deal, and after that my publisher asked me to write another book, and then the books just started to keep coming out of my head. And I was fortunate because publishers, liked what I had to say. I have a huge following, and they were willing to give me book deals. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So you're known as the talent maximizer. How did how did that come about? How did that start?
well, it came about as the result of the work that I do for my clients. I really
Okay.
help them either as individuals maximize their talent,
Yeah.
right? Or for organizations, they have this group of people, and they're like, okay, how do we get the most from them? What do we need to do as employers to get them fully engaged and for them to be willing to go above and beyond for us? And
Right.
so that's the strategy piece, where we figure out what motivates your team, not the team who works at the bank, because it could be
Yep.
a completely different situation. And so, people just started calling me that. So
Yeah.
then I trademarked it.
There you go. Yeah, I would have done the same thing. So, if you are watching live, I do have the chat open. I know we've been having some outages today. It sounds like with some cell phone companies. So, not sure if that's going to hinder anything with this platform. But if you are watching live and you want to comment, leave a question for us, we can certainly bring those up and get to them over the course of the show. So, going into this, and this is your topic. So when I asked you, Roberta, what topic you wanted to bring to Speakeasy HR, and you said, let's do talent magnetism. So this topic really falls in line with, a lot of different things that companies are having to face right now. And, competition, trying to get your best employees and trying to find a way to keep them engaged in the company and really go to the start of filling positions that are open with the top talent. And so in this book, there were a couple of things that really stood out to me, and there were 5 myths about today's workers. So can you explain some of those myths so that people, if they still feel that way, it might change their perception a little bit?
Well, I'll share a couple of myths that are very relevant today. The people who say that money doesn't matter are the people who have money. So, you can look at all the studies and all the stuff that comes out online, and it'll say, oh, the number one thing employees want is career development. Yes, that's after they're able to pay their bills.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now, given that it is more of an employer's market than the candidates market, we're seeing a lot of companies trying to buy people what I call on sale. And that's a terrible idea because, yes, people are desperate and they will take your offer, but the moment something better comes along, they will be out the door.
Yep.
Or they will make a decision and they will say, I will work my 40 hours and nothing more. So I think it's really important to understand that people want to be paid for the value that they bring to an organization. And just because you can pay them $1 less an hour doesn't mean you should.
Right. Nope. That is definitely true. And being in the work that I am in HR and working for a small business and really just trying to understand what we can do as a small business, right? And have a better brand, a good opportunity for folks that want to come on board and work with us. A lot of it is obviously got to offer some good benefits and perks and a great culture, but at the end of the day, with inflation and everything, people need to live and pay their bills, and a lot of people live out of their means, which you can't control that. But when someone is talented enough and they have value and you have a position open, you should pay them. You should pay them accordingly. So
Yeah, and I do think today, I think the people that are asking for pay increases, I don't think they're living out of their means. They're
yeah,
not out there buying fancy sports cars and things like that. They are just trying to pay their rent. And if you look at how much rent is today as a percentage of income versus 10, 20 years ago, it's quite startling. So,
right,
you know,
exactly. And you talked about the game of life in this book, which is one of my favorite games, and how each group of talent, based on their piece of their career and what's how to win them over and how to win them into your organization. So has that changed? Has that evolved when you look at those different work groups, or what advice would you give a company that's really trying to evaluate their workforce plan?
Well, I do think it's still very much like the game of life. And if you have never played this game, and like you, I've probably played it 100 times when my kids were little and when
Yeah.
I was growing up.
Yeah.
It's sort of the story where, you get in your car, and as you mature, you reach different stages in your life and you pick up different expenses, and such as children and things like that, or
Yep.
pets if you don't have kids. And your needs change. So for example, this is one of the things I write about in Suddenly in Charge, because when I was 24 years old, I didn't understand how my employees could call in sick when their kids were sick. I mean, what the heck is that all about, right? I didn't have any kids. I was
Yeah.
like, well, what do you mean you can't get a babysitter? Why aren't you here? Well, when I wrote that book one evening in that chapter, I was actually home sick with one of my sick kids. And I was like, oh, that's why this is a challenge for people. They just can't just throw their kid to a babysitter or whatever.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand those things. I didn't live that life. And now that I'm more mature and I have gone through that process, I have a much better understanding of the fact that people at that age need different things. And so when you as an organization, when you're working in an organization and you're looking at, well, what do my employees really value? You're going to find that your 20 something employees are going to be looking for different things than your baby boomer employees.
Yep.
So you have to come up with a way to, meet in the middle here.
Yep. So if someone's trying to improve their recruiting process to find better talent, there's a whole lot of things you can do. So what are some of the few tips that come to mind in a company's situation like that right now?
Oh man, I would just tell you to turn off those darn applicant tracking systems and get out there and have conversations because, what's so sad today is so many of those systems are repelling talent and you're trying to pull it in. And so by that, I mean, you just mentioned, David, that you were at a conference. Like, go to a conference, start chatting, let people know, hey, I'm looking for a such and such. Might
Yep.
you know anybody who is looking for a new opportunity? Like, that's going to be your best way of finding top talent, not, posting on LinkedIn or screaming, we're hiring. And then you get all the AI resumes coming in and you're overwhelmed and people are getting pissed off because you're
Yep.
not responding and you're ruining your employer brand.
And that actually happened. Someone came up and they were not local to where we are, but they're in Lexington. So we're an hour away. And she's like, hey, I'm here to kind of meet people and I'm looking for a new job. I've got this experience. I said, let's connect. So we had a virtual meeting and she sent me her resume and I said, hey, here are some of the things I would maybe suggest you do. I'll filter your resume around and see if we can, help find something for you. So yeah, that does happen. That does definitely happen. And, you brought up the difference between recruitment and retraction, or I'm sorry, the difference between attraction and recruitment in the book and explaining that, what would you tell people when they hear attraction and recruitment? Can you explain the difference in how attraction really trumps recruitment every time too?
Well, think about it. I mean, you know, who isn't attracted to Google, right? Like if you got a call from somebody at Google and you weren't looking for a job,
Right.
chances are pretty good after you vetted them and said, is this really Google? Why
Yeah,
are they calling
exactly.
me? After you've gotten through that, chances
Yeah.
are you would take that call in a New York minute. Even if you had to call in sick, you'd take that call.
Yep.
And so it's a lot easier to attract and hire talent when people are coming to you. It's that talent magnetism, as opposed to you sticking up your I'm hiring flag and hoping and praying some people will fall into your net who might be somewhat qualified.
Right. We do have a couple of comments that have come in. So while they are on live, I don't want to wait till the end. So
Sure.
let me bring this up and I'll take off this. So I think it's Deepak, I think is how the first name. What strategies would you recommend for attracting and hiring talented employees in a local area with limited job market awareness? And subsequently, what training and business and development programs would you implement to ensure their success in our business?
Okay. Well, I'm a little unclear what's meant by with a limited job market awareness. I'm not sure whether, Deepak, you're meaning nobody knows what about your company or whether you're literally in the boondocks and nobody knows that there's even a manufacturing plant in
Right.
the middle of Alaska or wherever you are.
Yeah.
So, I always here's the deal, okay? When I wrote Talent Magnetism, when I write a book, I don't even read it until I'm done writing it.
Leading a growing business It's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
Okay. So I finished writing the book and then I read it and I said, oh my gosh, like this talent thing, it is all about the leaders. It's all about how magnetic they are. Is a
Yep.
leader attracting talent or repelling talent? And
Yep.
that's when I wrote the book, The Magnetic Leader, because I was like, if you can think of some leaders who might have gone to another company and you were like, oh my God, I'm so sad they left. And then you kind of dial them up and you go, Joe, hey, what's going on? How are things? Because you are waiting for Joe to say, oh, I have an opening. I would love for you to come work here.
Yep.
So it really comes down to leaders getting out there, becoming these talent magnets, speaking at conferences, having people come up after the conference and wanting to get more information about you, your company, doing exactly, David, what you did, saying, hey, happy to have a conversation with you. I don't know if I can help, but I'll have that conversation.
Right.
Because 2 or 3 years from now, you may need somebody just like that woman who came up to you.
Yep.
And when you reach out and say, I didn't have anything then, but I have something now. Can we talk?
Yep.
She's
Exactly.
going to be like, absolutely. Not
Yeah.
like, who are you? Like, you wouldn't
Yep.
even return my call.
Yeah. And there's a list of 10 common traits that you talk about in the book Talent Magnetism. And it's the common traits for an exceptional workplace. And some of them include, great managers, like you were talking about, leadership. So when you look at that list, are there some that you feel like people might want to try to focus on first of that 10, saying that these are the top 3 I would really focus on? Because a lot of them in here, then I look at them and I'm like, those are all really important. Like, I don't know if there's one that's more important over the other, because they all are important. So if you look at that list and what you put on that list, are there 2 or 3 that you think are really the main focus points for organizations to focus on right now?
I think it's going to go back to what kind of organization you have and what kind of people you're trying to attract. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you're a organization that has a lot of entry level positions and you're trying to attract, entry level talent, which typically are younger people. Of course, they could be mature people as well, but typically you're hiring somebody who's got a high school degree, may have just graduated college, whatever. You have to really say, well, what is important to them, right? And they may value workplace, they may value career development and tuition reimbursement a lot more than if you're looking for seasoned managers
Yeah.
who already have their MBAs. They've got a lot of experience. They may want bonus money. They may prefer workplace flexibility. So I think
Yep.
you really have to look at who are you trying to attract,
Right.
and not do what the guy next door is doing because or he's looking for something completely different.
Right. Yeah. So I was checking the chat, and it sounds like you did answer the question. So thank you for that. You bring up in the book Talent Magnetism, you bring up a movie by Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams. And if someone hasn't seen it, there's a famous phrase in there: if you build it, he will come. So work attraction and companies brand and the purpose and the opportunities and what a company is trying to focus on right now, if they are trying to bring a new talent or keep the talent they have. What tips would you have for a company really trying to focus on improving their employer brand?
So if today I was advising Kevin Costner on that movie, I would say if you build it, he will come as long as you tell him. Okay, because some of you leaders here are working for some really exceptional companies, and
Yeah.
you are a best kept secret. Like
Yeah.
nobody knows that you guys are top dogs in this marketplace and that you treat employees really, really well because you don't do any work around social media. You don't really brag about it. You're just this great place to work that nobody knows about. So you have built it, but no one is coming.
Yeah.
So when I work with my clients, I help them amplify that message. And
Yeah.
how do we get the word out there that, man, you guys are spectacular and you'd be a fool not to consider this company?
Yeah. So talking about employee turnover, when someone hears employee turnover, they want to brag about, oh, we don't have a whole lot of turnover. We rarely lose people. We hire people and they stay and they're here for years. But that's not a good thing, right? You think
No.
employee turnover is not a bad thing.
Right. Otherwise, you're breathing your own exhaust. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like the same people have been here forever. There's no fresh air coming into the room, there's no fresh ideas. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe they're still there. I'll tell you a funny story. A very good friend of mine owned a travel agency, a pretty big one. And, one day he reaches out to me, he wants some advice, and he's like, I need to fire someone. I'm like, wow, okay, no worries. I'm like, well, when did you decide this? And I kid you not, he said 21 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
I can't make this stuff up. So if you read any of my books and you're like, I think she's making none of it is made up because people just give me the best stories. I was like, you can't be serious, right? Because he's a friend. I'm like, you can't be. He's like, yes, 21 years ago, I knew.
Wow. That's wild. Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of just really interesting stories. You could probably write several other books on just the stories you have, I would assume. So, so you wrote The Magnetic Leader in Talent Magnetism. So, talent magnetism, you talk about the rules of attraction, recommendations to propel you forward at warp speed. So, can you explain, that further and what the rules of attraction are, or just kind of explain that a little bit?
Well, yeah, but what I really want to talk about, because I think you brought up a good point before. You talk about warp speed, right? And man, companies are just taking way too long to hire people. I mean, I
Yeah.
challenged one of my clients I put out in my newsletter. I have a newsletter, and anybody who wants to subscribe can just send me an email and I'll put you on the list.
So fair.
And I challenged my community to slice their hiring time in half and hire somebody in like 6 days.
Okay.
And I told them how to do it. And I had a client reach out to me and say to me, okay, it wasn't 6 days, but instead of taking 6 months, I hired a director of development in 10 days. I
Hmm.
followed your advice, and in 10 days, and that's a big job. If you know anything about nonprofits, like the person who's fundraising
Yeah.
development, that is like top job. Really hard to find those people, and even more difficult to get them to jump over your
Right.
nonprofit.
Right.
And he did everything I told him to do, and he hired a spectacular guy.
Wow.
So, but if it would have dragged his feet and kept the candidate on the line for I don't know how many years, he never would have made that hire.
Yeah.
So I would challenge your listeners to write down every single step that they're taking right now when they're looking to fill a position. And then
Yep.
I'm going to tell you to put a line in the middle. All right. And anything that's in the lower half, stop doing. So
That's
start with the
very good
most
advice.
important pieces of your
Yeah.
process. And then it's like,
Yep.
oh, and then we have the meet with the employees. No, stop. See if you can get this process done in half the amount of time that it normally takes you. I bet you can.
Yeah. It's I feel like there are companies that really, and I've heard this phrase, you hire slow and fire fast. And it's like, yeah, you want to hire slow, but you also don't want to hire slow where people are applying for jobs and interviewing, and you are going to miss out on people that are not hitting all of the boxes that you need on a list, but they're hitting 7 or 8 of them out of 10, and it's like you feel like you're going to get someone better. You feel like you're going to get some. Well, you're going to miss out on people. So if you're hiring slow, I like you said, I really think there's companies taking way too much time, or they just are not even responding to people that apply. And I
Right.
think AI and I feel like technology is changing that landscape where people are just relying on AI to do a lot of things, which there are some companies getting in trouble for that because it's really they're trying to select the people through the platform in the technology that are going to fit exactly what that job is. So
So here's the problem. When you hire somebody that checks all your boxes, they have no room for growth, right?
exactly.
So they're just coming in, they can do this job with their eyes closed. And 6 months from now, they're like, okay, what else do you got for me? And you're like, well, this is the job. And then they're out of there. And,
Yep.
every time an employee leaves, it's one, two, three times their annual salary is literally seeping out the bottom of your organization.
Exactly.
So, you can times that by 10 because you lost 10 customer service reps in the last quarter.
Hmm.
Multiply that times, $50,000 a person. That's $500,000.
Yeah.
You can send that to Dave. You can send that to David, and he will distribute it to the charity of his choice.
There you go. There you go. So generations working together, and it's becoming more diverse. Obviously, the people at the end of their career are retiring, and the new people coming into the workforce, they all learn different. They communicate different. A lot of them are in front of their mobile device all day and they're not talking face to face, or there are companies that are working remote. So when you look at generations working together and how there are potential, gaps with talent that are occurring, how can you help us understand, and what are your suggestions when companies are in that situation and are really struggling with that?
Well, here's something that's pretty alarming. And I just had like a wake up moment. I must have been just like a month ago. There are now more Gen Z employees in the workplace than baby boomers.
Yep.
That was shocking to me. I'm a baby boomer. I have two Gen Z children. I can tell you we're like night and day. So I
Yeah.
have personal experience on what this sector of the workforce is looking for and what they'll put up with. A lot different than what we put up with. So, and then I'd also challenge you, David, on the assumption that a lot of boomers are retiring because they're actually not. They haven't done such a great job of saving, and they're not able to retire, so they're still in the workforce.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out a way to utilize both groups, of course the group in the middle, the groups as well. But I'm a huge fan of reverse mentoring, having the younger people teach the more mature people about technology, having the more mature people teach the younger people more about, office etiquette, things like that, the marketplace. These young people, they have never seen um, a work environment like we have today. Just
Yeah.
the fact that, you know, there aren't a lot of job opportunities out there. They've never experienced this.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of
You
scary.
you bring up the reverse mentoring, and I've heard that before. One of my previous guests brought that up. He was talking about ageism, and he said, I have a he looks way younger than he is, and at the end he says he's 70 years old, which you look at him and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're 70. I really hope I look similar at 70, but like he's telling me he talks to these 30-year-olds that he works with, and they like collaborate and they talk and they share, and he's like telling me about this reverse mentoring, and I was like, that's a really good idea. So obviously if people are listening, it's a great way to kind of cross train people based on their skill set and technology and communication, so
It's also really about having a sense of humor because
yeah.
I remember one of my clients telling me he was my age, he was and he was in the kitchen speaking to a younger employee about this guy by the name of Paul McCartney. And my client knew Paul McCartney as part of the Beatles. And finally, it just clicked with this younger person. He goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, isn't that guy who was with Wings?" You know, and my client was like, "You don't know who the Beatles are?" But you have to laugh, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because if that younger person, would have brought up, a hip hop star from today, I'm sure my client would have been like, "Huh?"
yeah. It's yeah,
So
you gotta have humor. You gotta try to have fun with it, you know. So companies that have competition, they have obviously trying trying to navigate through who those competitors are and if they are trying to get your best people from your company. And it may not be a huge issue, you know, depending on your industry and where you're located, but if a company has competition that they are finding potentially issues where some of their best people are leaving, um, learning the new rules of attraction and top talent and getting them to really stick around. So how if somebody is in that situation and they're trying to figure out like how to be proactive with that and keeping their best talent, is there is there anything that you would suggest to those kinds of situations?
I think one of the most effective projects that I've done to date was with a very large organization that was having extremely high turnover, and it was costing them millions, millions. And I went in and had conversations with people who had left the company to find
Okay.
out the real reason why they left. So if somebody tells you I'm leaving for a better opportunity, that's not the reason they're leaving. There's a reason why a better opportunity was more attractive to them. And
Yeah.
unless you know what that is, you can't fix it. And so, what was so surprising, even to myself, I thought I knew ahead of time what the answers were going to be. And in fact, the answers were nothing like what I predicted.
Huh.
And so going back to that company saved them, again, millions of dollars because they weren't just saying, okay, people are unhappy with pay raises for everybody. People are unhappy with the training, everyone gets training. No, it was something even deeper. And once we uncovered what that was, they were able to fix it. But if
Right.
you but there are two things. If you don't know what it is, you can't fix it. And number two, people are not going to tell you, the employer, really what they're thinking. So if you're going to have your head of HR do this, don't even bother. It's
Yeah.
got to be an outside person who has no alliances, no biases, who people are willing to open up to if you really are serious about this.
Yeah, you bring up a good point because I think a lot of them try to do it internally and manage it within HR or the managers, you know, having one-on-one meetings with your team I think is important, but you know, how much are they really going to share with their manager? If it's
Well, if you're my son or my daughter, I'm going to tell you to tell them as little as possible.
yeah,
Just
it
smile.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you got to know what motivates them. You got to understand like really how you're going to get the most work out of them and get them engaged in their job and what they really want to do within their career if they're set on their career. But when it comes to if you left next week, what would be the reason? Money, opportunities, whatever. And are they really going to be honest with you? I would say no. You know,
No,
so
and I think it's really important. One of the daughters of a client of mine was having a lot of challenges at work, and I suggested to my client to tell her daughter, why doesn't she try one more time to have a conversation with her
yeah,
manager,
yeah.
who was pretty inexperienced. And then, she had that conversation, and her daughter said, Mom, she's just not ready to hear what I have to say. And she left. She wound up leaving because she knew, like, you'll love this on the exit interview. I mean, on the exit forms, reason for leaving. This is what she wrote: I've given my 2 weeks notice. That's the reason for leaving. Okay. That's code word for I'm not telling you squat. There's a reason. I thought that was a great reason. I was like, that's brand new. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that is good. Uh, you talked about quiet cutting in the past, and for people that don't really know what quiet cutting, how would you explain that if someone's new to that concept?
Well, that's when you're reorganizing, okay? Or you're calling like Amazon just did. You're calling everyone back to the office. Well, you're doing that because you hope that some people will say, I'm not coming back. So
Yeah,
now you don't have to do a reduction in force or layoff because nobody's, they're saying, I am not coming back. So you're able to lower your head count
yeah,
quietly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. If anybody is watching live, I do have the chat up just to see if anybody other or any other comments came through. And so if you do have a question for Roberta, please put that in the comments or really where you're watching. Would love to see where people are watching today live. So one more question I have for you, Roberta, looking at the future into 2025 and everything that we've got going on over the next 3 to 6 months in our world, and what would be some of the new rules for the workplace attraction and retention that really anybody listening that is focusing on that, what kind of tips would you give them moving into next year?
I would really, really work on personalizing your recruitment strategy, really personalizing it, figuring out what your organization needs. I was just contacted by a Fortune 200 company. They are in the process of really looking at how do we do succession planning? How do we encourage our leaders to promote their people to other departments so we don't lose them to other companies?
Right.
So I would really take a look at your strategy and ask yourself, is this strategy in 2025 still relevant? Or do we
And-
need to do something completely different?
yeah, and it's got to be challenging and difficult too when people are still working remote and they're not working in person. So every strategy is probably different, and not every company. I feel like too, when it comes to people being interviewed, because people ask, "Hey, how's the work environment? Is it remote? Is it hybrid?" Is there any advice for that kind of work environment to stay relevant and competitive with the workforce and going into next year? When it
Well,
comes to like, should we go back to work? Should we stay at home? Should we have a hybrid work environment?
again, I think it's going to depend on the organization,
Yeah.
but I would look for reasons. I would look for ways to be flexible when you can be. I
Yeah.
wouldn't look, and I would also keep in mind that equal is not fair. So
Right.
here's what I mean by that. If you've got two employees in your department and one is killing it and does anything you ask and whenever you ask, and they say to you, hey, I need to start working 2 days a week from home. I'm caring for my ill parent, blah, 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 blah. Don't throw that rule book out and go, we don't offer that. You say absolutely. And when the other employee says, I'd really like to do that as well, and their work isn't up to where it needs to be, you
Yeah.
say, I'll give you that opportunity once you do X, Y, and Z. But right now, you're not doing any of that.
Yeah.
So try to individualize as much as possible.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. That is great advice. I'm going to pull this up for people who are listening, watching. This is Roberta's special for the Speakeasy HR special. Listeners can email Roberta at Roberta at mattressandconsulting.com to receive a free talent magnetism assessment. So again, if you want to get that free talent magnetism assessment, just email Roberta, which is Roberta at mattressandconsulting.com. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, Roberta. I know you are very busy and contribute to a lot of different places in the world of business and HR. So I really enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we get finished up here?
Well, the only thing I'd like to add is that if you're watching the recording later, if you tag me and you have a question, that'll help me. I'll answer your question if I can.
Yeah.
And if I can be of any help to your leaders, feel free to reach out to me. You've got my QR code up, and
Yep.
um, I just think that 2025 is going to be a very interesting time for organizations that are looking to really attract top talent that will stick around. And the time to start getting your strategy in place is now, not in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah, great advice. And I do have a survey. Anybody that is watching, it is to a quick survey, and I will email you if you put in your information a quick overview of 10 things to think about when evaluating your HR and payroll technology platforms. So again, if you want to scan that QR code, it'll go to a survey, and I will email you that information. So Roberta, it's been great to have you on, and I wish you all the best in your future work. And hopefully, we can connect again soon. But I really appreciate your time today, and have a great rest of your day. And we'll hopefully talk to you real soon.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.